Our next speaker is Susan Jaekel. Susan has been an artist for more than 40 years. She designed box art for Atari 2600 games, including, as Amy mentioned, Adventure, 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, and Brain Games. She has also contributed illustrations for children's books, textbooks, puzzles, and board games. Please welcome Susan. I'm going to make sure which one works for you. There we go. This is the good one.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, so here are some of my early inspirations as an illustrator. I was born to artist parents, and at 5 years old, I fell in love with horses, and I loved to draw. So I was fortunate because they brought me tons of art supplies to work with and beautiful classic illustrated books. Not only the classic illustrated, like Jungle Book there with Mowgli and Bagheera, but also the wonderful Marguerite Henry books illustrated by Wesley Dennis. And that was just my passion from the get-go. And having parents that worked in that field, it was sort of a no-brainer, although they did try to discourage me from that profession. But I went on to San Jose State, and even as, okay, which button do I press? Oh, wrong one. Even at San Jose State, I was inspired by the children's book illustrators working on the time. It's a little pale on the left hand, but that's Nancy Alcombe Burkhardt, who did incredibly beautiful illustrations. And and on the right is pictured by N.C. Wyeth, father of Andrew Wyeth, who was an incredible classics illustrator back in the early 20th century. And there's such drama, especially that guy over there in red, such beautiful drama that it just totally inspired me. And I thought, I want to illustrate children's books when I grow up and go into profession. And so I went to San Jose State, which has an incredible art department, still does. They've now switched from illustration to animation. And just recently at a Halloween party, there were 2 women animators there that have jobs in the game industry in San Francisco. So they're still producing wonderful people that can make a career with their talent and artwork. And so I started off in the Bay Area doing any old odd job I could do in terms of graphic design or inking floor plans. But then I found Addison Wesley, a publisher from, I think, Massachusetts, came to Menlo Park. And that's where I found my niche as a textbook illustrator. So I just started out with that when other Silicon Valley, more technical thing came in, like I did a few things for Apple Computer and did one of the illustrations for the first children's calculator. Winky the Owl was, and then somebody said, well, Atari is hiring. So why don't you take your portfolio over there and see? So I went over there, and the atmosphere was amazing in that it was so creative, and it was so different from the educational things because the pieces I did for them were very small, very specific of what I had to illustrate. I mean, it was wonderful work with my inspiration of animals and children and plants. That's what I love to do. But Atari was completely different because I had never played the game. I never did. The art director, Steve Hendricks, said, well, this is what it's about. Here's the concept. So I'd go back and do a few thumbnails for myself and then do a full-size pencil rendering on tissue. So these were bigger pieces, like 30 by 30. And, Atari was amazing. They had such a creative atmosphere, and they gave you free rein to do what you wanted with very little correction or changes. And I was also working with Dr. Martin's dyes and experimenting with airbrush. And one of the more popular pieces I did, that's back at San Jose State. So on the left are a contemporary children's book illustrator, Leo and Diane Dillon. They're a husband and wife team that illustrate, and then on the right is like a Bay Area Lois Lovejoy who does beautiful animals and plants and everything. But at Atari, I did Adventure. And that's been I've started getting fan mail about this game. Like 40 years later, people are emailing me saying how much they loved it, how the games were so simple at that time that they imagined what was on the box art. I mean, that's what carried through to them, that creative aspect. And it was such a treat, and it was just a short interlude in my career from 77 to 82 to work for Atari. At that time, they were so popular, they got in-house illustrators, which was a real phenomenon because that really hadn't happened since the 1950s that I knew of, to have a whole staff of fully paid illustrators. So that was sort of the end of my connection with them. So I went on to continue with the textbook illustration and got to illustrate some trade books and Ravensburger puzzles and stickers and board games. So it's been really fun, and I've always been inspired by my love of animals and doing children and plants. And so in around 2008, with an economic downturn, the textbook illustrations sort of went away, and I thought, well, now what am I going to do? Keep myself out of mischief. So then I started to do things that I had taken classes in botanical art at CCAC in Oakland, and I'd taken several workshops in pastel portraiture, but this is what I'm doing now is, come back here, is botanical art. So I've been exhibiting at Filoli, which is a wonderful gardens and house in Woodside there, and then also doing pastel portraits of pets, dogs and cats for people. So that's been my inspiration, that mix of art, beautifully illustrated books, and nature. Thank you.